All right, so today we'll go over chapter 11, actually one of the longer chapters, but the good news is much of the material that's in here we've already gone over. For instance, they talk about the create database command. We've already done it. They talk about the drop database command. We've already done it. They talk about the alter command. We've already done it. So much of this stuff is going to be review. And just like last time, about in the middle of the chapter here, if you look right there, they're going to talk about how to use MySQL Workbench. I'm not going to do that. All right. I've suggested again that you use, instead of MySQL Workbench, I have suggested that you use PHPMyAdmin, and that's what I've been using. So, working with databases, creating, selecting them, working with tables, creating them, selecting them, etc. Working with indexes. We'll skip the part on MySQL Workbench. We'll end up by talking very quickly about character sets and collations and storage engines. The plan right now, again, since I'm not going to be here on Thursday and I'm not going to be here on Friday, is those will both be lab days. All right. If you do have the first MySQL worksheet done, then stick it in a folder, zip the folder, and send it to me. As of right now, Tony's the only one who has. All right. The second worksheet is due next Monday. All right. And I've decided what I'll do is I'll put a capper on it here, that if you get the first MySQL worksheet turned into me by the end of the day on Friday, there won't be any penalty. All right. Probably what I'm going to do also is next Monday to give you lab. Now think about that. That means all day Thursday, and I've talked to Ethan. He's going to try to be here. Please use the guy. He's coming in here because he wants you to ask questions. So if there's something you don't get, please come in and ask him. He's done the exercises, and I gave him my key. So if you try something and it doesn't work, he should know what it is. But if I give you lab Thursday, if I give you lab Friday, and if I give you lab next Monday, that is 12 hours, basically, for lab. So even if you're behind, that should give you time to catch up. Then starting on Tuesday of next week, you don't have to bring your books, but we're going to start something where we start working on a CRUD project, CRUD, create, read, update, and delete, with C# and with a database. That's the plan. We'll work on that for the next several weeks, and the last week of class where we go, you will go the I think it's the 7th, 8th, and 9th. Yep, that last week, 7th, 8th, and 9th. That'll be lab, that'll be lab, that'll be lab. When you leave here on that Wednesday, the 9th, all right, hopefully you'll have everything turned in. That night and the next day, my grades typically are going to be due on the 10th by noon. So I've got to have grades in. So if you say, well, I'll get it to you, Jeff, but it'll be that Saturday the 12th. It's too late. I can go back and do a grade change, but it won't be done for quite a while. That's not a threat. It's just that's the way that they work it here. To be fair to them, that's exactly the way it was at the college I was at before this. Right? And remember too, if you haven't started on it, and we'll have to take a day, maybe we'll even take next Tuesday to go over this. We'll start talking about your portfolio and what you're going to have to do to update your portfolio. All right. So, how to work with databases. If you look up on the screen here, please. The difference between create database and create database if not exists. Well, I'm going to do this. If you look up, if you don't look up here, I'm going to start this up. And I know we have been going to PHPMyAdmin, but for now, I'm going to just go to here. All right, and I'm going to run this from the command line. Now, if I say show databases, it shows me all of my databases, right? All right. Well, notice I've already got one. For example, I'll use the Rankin one. So if I say create database Rankin and semicolon, notice I get an error. Can't create it, it already exists. All right. If I run the same command and I say create database if not exists, Rankin, semicolon. Now notice, nothing happened, but I get a warning. So by saying that if not exists, it turns the error into a warning. Does that make sense? So I can type in here, show warnings, and it says the same thing that you saw there. Look, can't create database, Rankin database exists. See that? Exactly the same. But now it's coming in as a warning instead of as an error. The recommendation is to always say create database if not exists. It's just that's considered the more professional, whatever you want to say, way of doing it. Notice now also we've got a drop database command. So if I come back here again, and again, show databases. All right. Let's say that I want to drop this sales order database. Okay. Now if I type drop database sales orders, I'm not going to hit enter and semicolon, that'll get rid of it. Does that make sense? It'll be totally gone. But I'm going to purposely put a mistake in here. So I said drop database sales order. I don't have one called sales order. Hit enter, error. Can't drop it, doesn't exist. Do it again, drop database if exists. Nothing happened, but I got a warning. Don't know what happened there. And again, you notice it's the same thing, but now it's a warning instead of an error. It's always recommended that when you create a database or when you're going to drop a database, that you always use the if exists. All right? Use makes it active. Do we have to go over that? I mean, you've been doing that, whether you realize it or not, when you are in PHPMyAdmin. So when you go into here, so I go in there into PHPMyAdmin and I click on sales orders. What I've just done is I've tell the system to do that command, use sales orders. Does that make sense? All right. I can come back in here and run my command. Let's see. Show tables. Tell it to run. Click go. And notice what it shows me, right? That's the same thing as if I came into here and said use sales orders, show tables. Exact same thing. Now, one thing it's never recommended that you do is what I just did, and that is you should not have both the command line and PHPMyAdmin up at the same time. Because now I can change them, I can add stuff, I can use either one. Well, that's a good thing. No, it's not. It's really easy to get the database out of sync by having both of those open. I'm just having them both open to show you that it's possible, and I'm running the same commands. All right. How to work with tables. Create table. Now, what's new in here, if you look at this box that's on the middle of page 316, or 317, sorry. When we've created tables, and you've done a little bit of this, all right, we're going to look at a big script later that's going to do all this. If you put not null there, so if I create a field and I put not null after it, that means I can't leave that field empty. Does that make sense? If I say something unique, so let's assume that I'm creating a database, and that database is going to be about employees. And I decide that every employee has an ID. and that's going to be the primary key. And every employee also has a social security number. That would make sense, wouldn't it? All right, to me it would. So I would probably put here unique. And what unique for that would mean, it's not that it's a primary key. It's not. But every single social security number must be different. Does that make sense? All right. You can put default values in. And I wish they would have done this on the examples they showed you, but they haven't. If you do this, auto increment, that says start with 1. So the first vendor ID in there will be 1, the second will be 2, the third will be 3, etc. But it'll automatically count them for you. So my biggest concern is if you look at this, again, look on the screen, look at this box. I'm asking you this question. Is there any of these 4 attributes that don't make sense? You will be using those on the last MySQL assignment. You're going to be creating the database. Then we're going to look at it. We're going to decide on one as a class. That's the one that we're going to end up using for our last project. All right? Anybody, not null, unique, default, or auto increment that doesn't get what these mean. Again, for a thing like default, I don't even know if they show one here, but I gave you an example. If we had something like employee state. My guess is that all of you are in Missouri right now. I could be wrong. It doesn't matter. But if I defaulted it to MO, then the what? 7 of us in here, we would all default to MO without having to put it in. So you create default values so it's easier for the people doing data entry. All right? There's an example of a default right there. There's some not nulls. The create table statement creates a table on the column names, data names, and attributes you specify. It is possible that you can go back and alter it later if you made a mistake. All right? I'm asking you this question right now. Give me somebody, please, a 3-word definition for what a primary key is. 3 words. And you all jumped on that. It's a unique record identifier. When we looked at the sales orders, remember the vendors table, what was the primary key? The vendor ID. The employees, what was the primary key? The employee ID. The customers, what was the primary key? The customer ID. All right? Those 3 fields uniquely identify every record in each one of those 3 tables. Now, if you turn up to page 319 and you look here, I'm just going to give you a little bit of terminology. Okay? Just some terminology. But what I want you to get is this. Notice that when you create a table, you can set the primary key up right when you create it. Please look on the screen here. See this? See how you wrote primary key right on the same line as when you created the table? And then notice down here, it's on a different line. You can do it either way. So for instance, if we didn't want to write primary key here, we could have come down here and said basically constraint VPK for vendor primary key. And then we could have said primary key vendor ID. And if you say, fine, Jeff, okay, you can do that. What's the advantage? There is not any. It's more typing. I would never want to do that. But you can do it. All right? Here's the thing where it matters. If you look up on the screen. If you've got a primary key, and I think they show it down here. If you've got a primary key, it's a concatenated primary key, so it's 2 or more fields, you have to do it like this. For instance, notice it's the invoice ID and the invoice sequence. I can't come here and write here primary key primary key. If it's a primary key that's 2 or more fields, you can't write them on the same line when you declare them. You've got to put them on a separate line. Why? Because that's how they set up the syntax of the language. That's the only the only reason I can give you. I didn't make up the rule. All right? So constraints are things that you add to make your database stronger. That's about all I can say. So we just there again, we looked at what? Primary keys. Previously, we looked at not null and default, etc. The hardest one for most people to understand on 320 and 321 is what's called the foreign key. So again, imagine we have this, right? So we've got here, we've got an employees table. And we've got an emp ID, an emp first name, an emp last name, an emp address, an emp city, and emp state. We're going to leave it right there. And we've also got a departments table. And that's a department ID and a department name. This is not meant to trick you, but please look up on the screen. Any fields in common between these two tables? I'm asking you this. Any fields in common? Yeah, but they're a different ID, right? All right. Would you agree that any one department can employ 0 or more employees? All right. And let's just assume that every employee works for exactly one department. I know that's not the way it is all over the place, but we're going to assume that. So right now we can't join these tables together. But if I come in here and I add this field, so what I did, this is the primary key here, and this is the primary key here. What I did here was I grabbed the primary key of one of the tables and I put it into the other table. It's put in there as what's called a foreign key. Imagine that my boss comes up to me, or comes up to Jesse and says, Jesse, I need a list of every employee's first name, their last name, and the department name that they work for. That wouldn't be an unreasonable request, would it? Now imagine we don't have this. Now there's no way to physically join those tables together. But by putting this in here, now we're able to come in and say, select. We're able to come in here and say, select emp first name, emp last name, department name from employees, I'm not going to do any aliasing, comma, departments, and I can say where employees dot department name equals departments dot department name. Now I can do that and it'll work just fine. And it works just fine because I took the primary key of one table and put it into the other table. Where it is in the other table is referred to as a foreign key. It's another constraint that you can use, all right, but they formally define a foreign key at the bottom of the page. As it says, it requires values in one table to match the values in another table. And it makes sure that the tables stay in sync, that there is a relationship between them. All right. And let's say that I came in here and I wanted to get rid of this table. So I want to say drop table departments. So I go and issue that command. I hit enter. I'm asking you this. Is that going to work? If I run that command, is that going to work? The answer is no. As long as I've got records in here that have a department name on there, that department name there is dependent on that department name here. Or I'm sorry, this actually should have been ID. I could have made it name, but it would be better to make it ID. But the ID that's in here depends on the ID that's there. Does that make sense? That literally is what's referred to as a foreign key relationship. All right? All right. You may or may not remember yesterday when we went through a couple of examples, we did some stuff similar to what you see on 323. Remember when we altered the tables? We altered the table, in two of the examples that we went through yesterday, we added another field. All right? Well, notice, what does this do? It adds a new column, and it puts it at the end. Its name is last underscore transaction underscore date. It's a type date. Does that make sense? Right. This drops a column. What you should try to do. All right. You remember back when we were talking C# and we started to create GUIs, and I said what you should do is you should go in and build your interface. Then you should go back and you should rename all of the controls that you put in and then write code. Remember that? Well, in the same way, when you're doing this, if you decide that you're going to change your database, you're going to add fields, remove fields, etc., you should do that before you put any data into it. Sometimes that's not possible, but you should try to make sure that once you start to put in data, that the database schema, the columns, etc., look the way you want them to look. So the first one that's circled there adds a column. The second one removes a column. The third one changes the length of a column. Now this is really important. Please look up on the screen here. Let's assume that this was 10 and now we're making it 100. That makes sense? Okay, that'll work. What you got to worry about is, let's assume that was 100 and you want to make it 10. Most of the time it'll let you do that, but what's that going to do? It's going to whack off the last 90 characters. And it's not going to tell you, it's not going to say, Tony, are you sure you want to do that? It's just going to do it. All right? You can change the data type of a column. Modify this, char 100, not unique. What do you think would happen if I took something like this? If I said alter table vendors, modify vend name, and I did this, int. And I had names in there like Rankin Technical College, GM. It's going to break it. If it's expecting numbers and I put strings in there, it's going to break it. Right? It's very easy to break stuff in here. That's, again, why you want to change all of that stuff before you put data into it. We're going to do that as well. Here they're changing it, the default value, all right. How to alter table constraints. Page 325. All right, so notice here we add a primary key. Here we add a foreign key. Here we drop a primary key. Here we drop a foreign key. Hopefully you remember these three commands collectively are known as DDL commands. DDL meaning data definition language commands. They work with the schema of the database. How to rename a table? Not very hard. Rename table. So if you decided you wanted to call it vendor instead of vendors, boom, that's all you do. All right. Everybody see this line right here that I just circled? You see that? That's the same thing as saying these two things do the same thing. You can say truncate table vendor or delete from vendor. They both remove all the data. You still have the schema for the table, still have the fields, but there's nothing in them. Okay? The recommendation is that you use truncate. It's supposed to work a lot faster, so if you've got a table with millions of records in it and you use truncate, it'll run faster. Again, you use drop table to get rid of the table and its schema. I love this. You shouldn't do this without talking to the DBA first. If you work for a big company, you won't be able to do this because the DBA won't let you screw up his or her or their database. That's just the way it is. All right, we talked a little bit about indexes the other day. I'm up to page 329. All right, and on page 329, they show you the syntax. This is how you create an index. Create index followed by the name, on followed by the table, and then in parentheses, okay, the field or fields. They put here IX on the end. Everybody see this? Underscore IX. Most of the time people use IDX. I never saw IX before this. All right? Do you have to? No. MySQL automatically creates an index on any primary key field, on any foreign key field, and on any unique constraint field. Anything else, you have to manually add. All right. Please look up on the screen here or look in your book on page 331. Because this example here that's on 331 and it's on 337, on those two pages, if you get this, there's nothing more to it. So, drop database if exists, AP. Create database, AP. Use AP. These three lines that are at the top, not the comments, but the three lines, you should understand all of them. First one says, look and see if I've got a database named AP. If I do, get rid of it. All right? Then create a new one by that name. Then make it active. Then we're going to come in here and create the tables. This is the schema. Remember, create is a DDL, data definition language command. This will create first a table called general ledger accounts, then a table called terms, then a table called vendors. You'll notice that we've now set up the primary key for account number. We've set up the primary key for terms ID. We set up the primary key for vendor ID and did an auto increment on it. We've got several fields in here that are not null, and we've got a couple that are unique. And they continue adding more database schema on page 333. Here's another table, invoices. And another one under that, line items. That's everything. But what I'm telling you is you should be able to write this stuff now. All right, right here. Because that's what you're going to end up doing for your last MySQL assignment. Again, I'm skipping the MySQL Workbench. In case you didn't know this, if you decide you want to use MySQL Workbench, you have to go and put that in as a separate, it's an add-on. So you'll have to go out to MySQL the MySQL site and add it yourselves. All right, almost finished. Up to page 340, how to work with character sets and collations. It says here, when a column is defined with a string as a char or a varchar, MySQL stores the value for each character. It uses a character set to map numeric values to the characters of a string. And if you say, I don't know what that means, well, look at this. Remember, the only thing that a computer can understand are zeros and ones. So if you look on the screen there, that's pretty ugly. If I come in there and I type in my name, capital J, little e, little f, the system says, okay, capital J, that's a 74. Little e, that's a 145. Little f, that's a 146. And a little f, that's another 146. Those are what are called the ASCII or American Standard of Code for Information Interchange. Remember, all the computer understands are zeros and ones. So it says 74, 145, 146, 146. Then it has to take those numbers and convert them. And I don't want to bore you, but here, let's see. 0, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. So 64, 32, 16, 8, 0, 1. Now again, you may not care, but I just want to show you this. This number right here, that's how many ones you have. That's how many twos you have. That is how many fours you have. That is how many 8s you have. That is how many 16s you have. This is how many 32s you have. And this is how many 64s you have. So do the math. I've got 1 64, I've got 1 8, and I've got 1 2. That makes sense? Add them up. 64, 8, and 2 is 74. So that number right there is what the computer understands. 1001010. That's what the computer gets. All right. The act of taking these letters and mapping it into these numbers is what's known as the computer's character set. That's what they're mentioning there on pages 340 and 341 in the text. That's about as hardware-oriented as we get in this program. And they go through this. It says the two most commonly used character sets are Latin 1, which we've used forever, and UTF-8, which is what we're moving towards now. UTF-8 says I want to be able to use any character from any country. It uses the Unicode character set. You want more, you can read the stuff on the bottom of page 341. If you want to see your character sets and your collations, you can type in these commands. So let's try them. Show char set. There it is. Show char set. Semicolon. Enter. Those are all the different character sets that are available. Notice Korean, Thai, Hebrew, Japanese, Swedish, etc. All right? It's meant to work worldwide. You can also work with collations. All right? So instead of saying show character set, we can say show collation or collations. I never remember. Show collation. See, we get a lot more back there. 234 rows. But it shows the different collations. So what's a collation? Every character set has a corresponding collation that determines how the characters within the character set are stored internally in the computer. You can specify your own character set and collation. They show you examples on 345. Typically, unless you're a database administrator, you don't worry about this stuff anyway. All right, last thing to show you quickly, and we'll be done with the chapter, is how to work with storage engines. There's two major storage engines that you use here. They are MyISAM and InnoDB. And you say, we never used a storage engine. Yeah, because if you don't put any down, it defaults to this. It defaults to InnoDB. 99.9999% of the time, that's what you want. If you're doing a lot of work with searching, you might change it to MyISAM. The thing is, when you use InnoDB, you can use those foreign keys that we talked about before. When you use MyISAM, you can't use foreign keys. But what you can do is you can set up, when you set up a database, you can tell it which storage engine to use. So notice engine equals. If you don't put anything in there, and we haven't been, it's as though you typed in engine equals MyISAM. All right? And that's it. It's 8:53. Let's come back at 9:10. We're going to go over the next 4 examples on your second worksheet. We did the part of the first 4 yesterday. I did not tape that. So Jesse, you can maybe you can buddy up with Tony, and he will help show you what we did for those first 4 yesterday. All right, so let's get back. Come back at 10 after, please.